Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Locked On Lakers for Monday. Brian Kamenetsky and Andy Kamenetsky. Andy, it took a little while. There was a lot of confusion. There was a lot of math that is hard for both of us. But the Lakers, we know what's happening. They got a play-in game.
Yep. They will be facing the Golden State Warriors Wednesday to try to get that 7 seed. If, for whatever reason, they do not win, fear not. They have another crack at the playoffs for the 8 seed, whether against the San Antonio Spurs or the Memphis Grizzlies, whoever wins that game. So by virtue of being the 7 seed right now, the Lakers get 2 cracks at the apple. But first will be at Staples Center against, really, it feels like against Steph Curry.
We'll talk about that because it's not. It feels like that, but it's kind of not because Golden State is playing very, very well. And they're a little bit more than Steph. But, yeah, it does feel like Steph, who's been averaging like 37 points a game for his last 10 games.
They're a little more than Steph, but not a lot more.
I'm just saying he's a big part of it. Draymond is really playing excellent right now. So
sure.
The Warriors are a little bit more than Steph, but Steph is, I think, fair to say, a significant part of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Brian, let's not overthink this thing.
No, it's a lot of Steph.
Let's not overthink it. Let's not try to sound so basketball genius that we actually sound like idiots.
I'm not disagreeing with the Steph part.
Yeah.
Entirely. All right, so we got that. We'll get a little bit into the game. Obviously, before Wednesday night, Andy and I will be previewing the hell out of this one in all kinds of ways. So we probably won't get super deep into the matchup tonight for this show, but it's coming. It's definitely coming. We're going to take a deeper look really at where they are right now heading into the playoffs. LeBron James playing a couple games over the weekend. How'd he look? Anthony Davis is back. Dennis Schröder is back. The center rotation seems maybe like it's got a little bit of clarity. So we'll do that in our first couple segments. And then hopefully before the end of the show, take a look at the bracket overall, because after a huge mess, Andy, there are some really interesting first round matchups, no matter how this thing shakes out with the play-in game. Do want to tell you that the NBA playoffs, as we're talking about, they're almost here. So don't miss the big storylines and team previews you can find every day on the Locked On NBA podcast. Follow the Locked On NBA podcast on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, we'll start with LeBron because that's the part that matters most for the Lakers. He played over the weekend, Andy. How'd you think? What'd you think?
I thought it was
the asterisk that he did seem to tweak his ankle a little bit on Sunday in New Orleans.
Yeah, he was driving to the basket and landed on a Pelicans defender's foot, that same right ankle, and he was stretching it out a bit. Looked, slightly like he was limping, like not.
He looks to me, he looked like a guy who didn't want to look like he was limping.
A little bit, yeah. But he also, though, what I took to being a good sign, beyond the fact that Frank Vogel said afterwards that he was fine, LeBron said afterwards that he was fine. He said,
I'll be fine.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, he said he'll be fine. Come on. Like, I think that's...
I don't, but he's not. Here's the thing. He's not fine. Fine is like, I'm good to go. Like, this is like, he's tried to play twice now coming back from it. The first time he came back, he hurt it again. And then it took longer. Apparently, as we were talking about all last week, took longer to heal.
Absolutely.
Comes back, plays 2 games, and tweaks it again in the second one.
What I'm saying is,
it's going to be a problem,
right? Well, it could be a problem. It's not is going to be a problem in terms of the way he looked, though. In these 2 games, he looked like LeBron. He played really well. He was able to drive aggressively to the basket. He had really good footwork. He was hitting shots. He was lively on the defensive end. Does it mean that he's completely out of the woods with this ankle? No. I mean, that by definition, when you've had this type of problems over the last couple months with it and missed this much time, it would be premature to say that he's going to necessarily be problem-free moving forward. That being said, though, I also think that you're reading too much into the semantics of what he said off the top of his head with "I'll be fine."
No, but see, I'm not. It's not just semantics. It's his tone, his sort of the language again, the body language going off the floor.
He was smiling on the sidelines after
the way he sounded in the press conference, all this other stuff. When he talked after the game, I took a lot of that to mean it's Wednesday, it's the playoffs. Doesn't matter if I'm feeling, where I was before, or if you want to call it a setback or not. Like it was, I didn't take it as, oh yeah, it was nothing. Like,
I didn't say it was nothing. I said, I think,
but that matters. And so I completely agree with you that if he is able to get back to, or for most of the time that he's able to play, he looks like he did against New Orleans. There were 2 or 3 or 4 moments in that game where, like the acceleration, for example, LeBron going 0 to 60 at that play in the first half where he pokes the ball away on the steal. And I mean, like a dude like a sprinter coming off the blocks, runs past a bunch of 20-something-year-olds and gets it and finishes, his explosion to finish at the rim, starting and stopping, all that stuff. I was up to that point in the fourth quarter, incredibly encouraged by what LeBron looked like on Sunday. My concern is just how frequently he's going to go, it's going to be a couple steps forward and a couple steps back and treading water in this way. And whether or not they're going to be able to get very far with him kind of in this tenuous spot.
We'll see where it goes, and obviously 2 people can see the exact same thing and walk away from it with 2 different impressions. I did not get the impression that he looked particularly concerned about this. That was my take on it, watching him in this post-game press conference. I didn't think he looked particularly worried. Therefore, I'm not going to be particularly worried about it. Out beyond the context of just he's been dealing with a high ankle sprain that leaves him vulnerable in a very tangible way. But I don't think this incident reflects anything to worry about specifically, if that makes sense.
It makes sense to me. The other, obviously AD, he took who they played before Indiana. That was the game he took off, correct? Yes. And I thought he played a nice game against the Pacers on Saturday. Very clearly was in cruise control on Sunday against the Pelicans, particularly as it became clear the Lakers were not going to be able to play their way out of the play-in game. But there were still moments where AD looked, like he had the burst. Like I'm less concerned about recurrence of his, certainly, I guess the ankle and the Achilles area and all that. The groin, I guess, is probably the bigger concern at this point.
Groins are so tricky.
He seemed okay. Like he wasn't working that hard on Sunday, which is fine, but he seemed okay.
Yeah. I thought in particular against Indiana looked very good. And, there was no reason for him, like you said, to particularly bust ass in this game, considering what the stakes eventually weren't. And then there was a Schröder who came back from the COVID health and safety protocols over the weekend. I thought looked better Sunday against New Orleans than he did Saturday against Indiana. Provided more, I guess, clarity with his play on the floor than he did his explanation about what the hell was going on.
Yeah, and this is, good God, in terms of just COVID rabbit holes, this is as deep of one as you. So to recap, if you missed the news on this would have been Saturday, right?
Yeah.
Post-game Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
Dennis Schröder said after the game that he did not test positive for COVID, but he can't get it again in the playoffs, and he's also the only guy who didn't get immunized.
Right.
There's a lot going on here.
There's a lot of information that is missing there because in theory, what would protect him most from getting it, as he said, no more during the playoffs would be either having had it or having been immunized. Like, I wonder, is this potentially a case where, Schröder said he didn't test positive? Is he possibly thinks positive is like a positive result.
I don't know.
Like you didn't realize, in most cases.
Right, because most positive is good. Like,
Right,
did you test negative? Oh, I was negative. It's a very negative situation I found myself in with COVID.
Like he doesn't realize that negative is actually what you wanted.
What he really seemed like was really irritated that he was being asked the question.
Right. He got really irritated that nobody seemed to understand what the hell he was talking about.
Right, because it was completely incomprehensible. And I'm not saying, look, I mean, people we saw with the Yankees, like guys, they're the quote unquote breakthrough cases of COVID. And it's not even a judgment that we're getting into right now of whether or not Dennis Schröder should have gotten immunized. I think everybody should get immunized, but that's not a conversation we're having right now. I just didn't understand what the hell he was talking about. Like none of it made sense. And we were all left very, very confused. The guy though, I think that had the biggest impact. We talked about AD and we talked about LeBron, and you just cross your fingers and hope LeBron looks okay on Wednesday and then going forward. The guy that I think whose impact changed the most over these weekend's games was Andre Drummond. And so let's talk about him next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by Indeed. If you are the hiring expert for your company, what you really need is help making your short list of quality candidates. You need a hiring partner who helps make your life easier. You need Indeed. Indeed is the job site that makes hiring as easy as 1, 2, 3, post, screen, interview, all on Indeed. Get your quality short list of candidates whose resumes match your job description. Only pay for the candidates that have must-have qualifications. Schedule and complete video interviews in your Indeed dashboard. Indeed makes hiring the right talent fast and easy with tools like Indeed Instant Match, giving you quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed fit your job description immediately. And Indeed skills tests that on average reduce hiring time by 27%. According to Talent Nest, Indeed delivers 4 times more hires than the other job sites combined. That is insane. Get started right now with a free $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/locked. Get a $75 credit at Indeed.com/locked. Indeed.com/locked. Offer valid through June 30th. Terms and conditions apply.
So, not to overstate things, Andy, there's been some hand-wringing over Andre Drummond since he joined the team. Some people, including the former host of this show, don't like him. They don't like that he plays or how he plays. And the whole time we've really been waiting to see, like, okay, what does it look like when he plays with LeBron and Anthony Davis? Because that's what it's going to look like in the playoffs. And at the very least, I think you could look at these games over the weekend and say, oh, I get it, because Drummond gave them what we hoped that he would, you and me hoped he would, which is a couple easy buckets, whether it's on, weak side action and standing in the dunker spot, whatever it might be, a bunch of second chance opportunities and all this stuff. Like, he's kind of rebounded a bunch, got a couple of easy buckets, and that was sort of the role. And it looked to me, at least, Andy, like it could work in the postseason.
Yeah. Andre Drummond has, over the last week and a half, I think, started to get himself into a groove. He's had 5 straight games with double-digit rebounding, 4 straight where he had double-doubles. And, his role starts getting more.
And by the way, other than Sunday night, was a positive, plus minus on all of those.
Right. And his role starts getting more, I think, simplified and clarified the more of the rotation members that are going to be out there are actually available, particularly LeBron and AD, but I think also Schröder. Andre Drummond has, over the course of his career, shown that he's not somebody that you can build around and go deep in the playoffs. Fine. Most players aren't in this league. Like, that's not really an insult. However, the hope, I think, from the Lakers was he could be perhaps their 4th, 5th, maybe 6th most important member of the team, but be exceptionally overqualified for that role. And I think we're starting to see more signs that that's possible. And either way too, I think it's also really important to note that he has been saying he's feeling more comfortable now. Like, his start with this team was as chaotic as everything we've seen over the last few months with guys in and out of the roster. He had been barely playing before he got injured, and this was on the heels of basically being exiled by Cleveland for like 2 months. It's been a legitimately rough transition for Drummond beyond whatever limitations or frustrations he has as a player. Like you had said before that he got a few easy baskets in this game, and that's great. He is also capable of making incredibly easy baskets.
Oh, he blew what was one of the easy Sunday night against New Orleans. He blew one of the easiest layups I've ever seen an NBA player miss.
He is, Brian, Andre Drummond, a very aesthetically displeasing player.
Yes.
I mean, he seems like a really good guy.
If Andre Drummond were a movie, Andy, they'd fix a lot of that in post. Like don't worry about it. Just keep shooting. That's just keep filming. We're moving on. Like
you got a great editor.
Yeah, it'll all look good in the end. Don't worry about the dailies. And we'll get into this a little bit before the end of the show in terms of whether teams are better off playing the Lakers now versus later, because that's something that Jared Dudley talked about. Jared Dudley, who, by the way, played on Sunday, coming all the way back from a torn ligament, which is awesome. Cool for him. Did not want to go out, finish his career as a guy with an injury. But, I think the way you're describing Drummond kind of describes the Lakers. We talked in our last segment about LeBron looking good, and he did. And we just, knock on wood, the ankles really is okay, and it's not going to be an issue. AD, I think, looked healthy, and you could see the burst. And when he was in those moments where he felt like he needed to try, it was fine. Like, and it worked okay. But the team as a whole looked good in spots, looked really raggedy in spots. Like the defense was excellent at moments and not so. I think particularly against Indiana more than even New Orleans, because the Indiana game, I felt like they were a little bit more motivated. That's kind of where they are right now. So those moments with Drummond, like you can see it and they look good, but there's still some miscommunication there periodically. And, Drummond, I feel like, Andy, what you're saying is like, get the offensive rebound and then pass it to someone else. Don't try to put it back. You don't need to do that yourself.
Here, I would say if you're pretty certain that even if you can't make the basket, you're going to get fouled, fine. Because, Drummond's not a great free throw shooter, but there's value in getting, a team in foul trouble. And he's somebody that you are going to have to account for around the basket. So, there's a positive to that. That being said, if you don't have a clean shot or a clean foul coming, pass the ball out.
Move the ball. I mean, the stuff that really got my attention, it happened both on Saturday and Sunday, were moments when I wish they do this a little bit more. The Lakers ran a Anthony Davis. No, I'm not doing that.
Stop.
AD is Anthony Davis. Andre Drummond has not earned AD status.
No.
So LeBron and AD run the pick and roll, and you get that going. And then, I think, my apologies if I'm getting this slightly wrong, I think I was on Saturday, they had it where, Davis gets the ball and dishes to Drummond in the dunker spot. Easy dunk for Drummond. I think one of the other times they did it ended up being straight to Drummond. LeBron keeps it and finds Drummond because they're looking for AD on the roll. Plays like that are going to be available because, of course, you're going to put all of your eyeballs on LeBron James and Anthony Davis. And that means Drummond's going to be open, KCP's going to be open, whoever else is going to have looks at the basket, which is how their whole offense has been designed. Like, that's the idea. They don't really have a system. They have those two guys. And if it works, they'll be okay. They'll generate enough offense because the defense, once everybody locks in, I think will still be excellent. It's just got to get there.
For what it's worth, and I will be the first to admit I did not see this coming, but I think it's been the case. Drummond's transition defensively has actually come along faster than offensively. Like, I did not expect that to be the case, but he is not, future Hall of Fame class of 2021 Ben Wallace, locking down the middle defensively. But he's not a problem either.
I think most of the Sunday night's a great example. A lot of times when that plus minus gets a little bit lower or something with him, sometimes it's not him. It's how much effort is Anthony Davis putting into the game. And so Overall, I think that end of it has been good. But along these lines, Jared Dudley, I just mentioned it, said something I thought was really interesting after the game, that despite that it looks like teams are trying to avoid the Lakers, certainly in the first round, playing their way out of the Lakers bracket, perhaps we'll try to avoid them as long as possible. It might be smarter to get them early. So we'll talk about that next, whether or not we think Jared Dudley is correct about that.
Locked on Lakers brought to you by Bet Online. Bet Online, the fastest, easiest way to bet on all of your sports action. Baseball season's in full swing. You can track all the action at Bet Online. Always tons of sports action on the go. Get all the latest news, odds, info on your sporting needs, including MLB, NBA, NHL, UFC, MMA. Obviously, you can be betting on the play-in games coming up. A lot of big stakes in the NBA. So before the next pitch, go to Bet Online on your laptop, mobile device. Check out all the great sporting news, sign-up bonuses, contest information. Don't sit on the sidelines anymore. This is your chance to get into the game as teams prep for their run to the playoffs. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today. Receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit with the promo code LOCKEDON. Bet Online, your online sportsbook experts.
Locked On Lakers also brought to you by Built Bar. Andy, I'm a snacker. Not ashamed to admit it. I am out there. I tell everyone, like even people who don't ask, I just tell them I'm a snacker, but I need stuff that's good for me, healthy.
Why a lot of people give you sideways looks.
It is. It's a weird thing. It's not an icebreaker. People.
No.
Just understand that. But I want something that's healthy,
like that
tastes good. I got to get through this. It's high in protein, low in sugar and calories. That's Built Bar. And the improved Built Bar, Andy, it's even more delicious than before. They've got 18 flavors, 18. Including 6 new ones that like caramel brownie, cookies and cream, cherry barcia. So go to BuiltBar.com and use the promo code LOCKED15 and you'll get 15% off your next order. Use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at BuiltBar.com. So Andy, was Jared Dudley right? Do the Warriors, for example, the Warriors and either San Antonio or Memphis, on Friday if the Lakers lose on Wednesday. Are these the teams that actually have the best chance of beating the Lakers right now?
I wouldn't say Memphis or San Antonio, just because I don't think either one of them is good enough to count on beating the Lakers in a one-game match.
Right, even if LeBron and AD. But let's just focus on Golden State and then sort of that hypothetical first-round matchup. If you have to get them, are you better off getting them now?
I think there's a real strong case to be made for that. I mean, Golden State right now is just hot enough that you feel like a one-game series against anybody, they're live. You know what I mean? The way they've been playing and the way Steph has been playing, nobody feels safe with that. But if you're talking about, say, Phoenix, who, if the Lakers win this play-in Wednesday, that's who they're going to get in the first round, especially when you take into account that Phoenix, other than Chris Paul and Jay Crowder, and I guess a little bit of Dario Saric, nobody who matters on that team has a whole lot of playoff experience. So they're going to be dealing with their own adjustments. I think you would benefit getting that early round matchup against the Lakers when they're still figuring things out a bit. I mean, they're at a high level in terms of teams that look to figure things out. And I think it's important to remember that early in the season, before things just started going off the rails with health, the Lakers came together remarkably quickly. I mean, for a team that had a lot. Second year in a row,
right. They gelled with new pieces very quickly.
Right. So if you want to give them a benefit of the doubt that they could replicate that again, then maybe that transition period won't be that difficult. But there certainly is a school of thought that they've got a little bit of catching up to do, and maybe you could get them when things are a little more awkward. I mean, I guess you could just as easily argue that a team that's been struggling with health is going to struggle to go multiple rounds without a recurrence.
I think what like a team like Denver is hoping, for example, by playing their way out of it, is like you avoid the Lakers in the first round. And by doing that, you hope you avoid them entirely because someone else will beat them. Which is it's kind of a weird way of looking at it. Like, we don't want to play them. We think they're beatable. Somebody else could play them. We don't want to play them. But maybe somebody else will beat them. I 1000% understand why any team would be like, that's not for us. And because if they, like, why on earth would you want to play Anthony Davis and LeBron James? Because for every other team that has continuity questions, and that's the Clippers, Denver is still kind of getting a lineup together, and Dallas has had guys. Every team in the league has had guys in and out of the lineup or injuries or whatever. Utah's been without Donovan Mitchell for a little while now, and they're familiar with him, but nobody is completely intact. The Lakers aren't a team that I think requires as much ramp up as you've said, Andy, because they are so fundamentally built around these two guys and LeBron and AD and everybody else. It's not that hard to figure out what you're supposed to do around those two. I can be honest with you. And this is probably some recency bias. The Lakers just throttled Phoenix, last week. And Golden State is playing really well, and Steph has just gone nuclear. I am more frightened of Wednesday's game than I am a potential 7-game series against Phoenix. I think the Lakers have a much better chance of getting through that. And obviously they're not eliminated from the playoffs if you lose to Golden State. But I think they have a much better chance of losing that game than they do losing to Phoenix in an opening round.
Yeah, I
would say Utah in an opening round.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, along similar lines, assuming everybody stays healthy, I think the Lakers, it's weird to say this, but you could make a pretty strong argument that they have a better chance of getting through a series with Golden State than one game against Golden State.
Oh, yeah, no, look, this game is scary for every reason that we said. Like when you're just sort of thinking about like, oh man, the play-in game could be an option now. LeBron's hurt, AD's hurt, the schedule's really hard. God, what would that like? Why wouldn't you want to play in this? Because you could end up against a team like Golden State, and who've gone 15-5 over their last 20. They, I believe, over that stretch, are the second best team in the NBA defensively. And I mean, in some ways, they're a lot like the Lakers. They struggle offensively and have been excellent defensively. Steph's averaging 37 points a game over his last 10. Draymond is playing as well as he has all season. Andrew Wiggins has been, quiet good this year. And like, they're weird dudes that you never heard of, Juan Toscano Anderson and Jordan Poole and those dudes. Yeah. They're all playing well.
They're playing
so it's
well.
Just they're a frightening team to. It's a good thing that it's not lose and go home. They do get a second chance if the Lakers lose on Wednesday.
And I'm not going to lie. I would find it stunning if they actually lost the second game against San Antonio or Memphis. I would find that pretty shocking. I wouldn't find it shocking if they lost to Golden State. Were I to bet on it, I would bet on the Lakers because I think ultimately they're the better team. They're the more experienced team, top to bottom. And I know that Steph and Draymond have championship experience, but so does more or less the entire Lakers team. And they're better.
Jared Dudley pointed it out with his typical candor. They've got championship experience. They've got championship DNA. They are not the same as the championship Warriors.
No.
That, played, 4 years in a row? Like, that's not them.
5 years in a row.
5 years in a row.
5 years.
That's impressive.
Yeah, I mean,
one more than four.
It's not the same group. So I think you're correct ultimately that they could maybe get upset this one game against Golden State. I also do think that Phoenix or Utah, they don't seem scary to the Lakers, but some of that may just be Phoenix and Utah. They don't have sort of the aesthetics that would make you feel scared of them. They just don't have it. Like they're a team that's going to have to do it before you really start getting.
I don't want to be this guy in the same way that I texted you during the game. Like I don't want to be why was blank still in the game guy? Because I do understand why LeBron James was in the game. First of all, he's played like 15 minutes in the last 2 weeks. The playoffs are around the corner. The guy wants to play and needs to play, but the risk is he's going to hurt himself, which he almost did. Even if he's okay, it's still frightening. I don't want to be the guy who dismisses Utah because they're Utah, like, oh, those guys, they always find a way to lose. They are the number 1 seed in a really hard conference. This is an excellent team. They have the best point differential in the conference by a mile. They've earned their spot here, and they've done it for the last little time without Mitchell. Phoenix just feels like a matchup thing. Like, I just look at those matchups going, that doesn't seem to work for them.
Well, it's also too, I think a lot of this stuff comes down to does Team X have somebody that scares you in the playoffs? When you look at the Lakers, obviously they've got 2. LeBron and AD are frightening as hell in the playoffs. You need evidence, go back to last year. Kawhi Leonard for the Clippers, frightening in the playoffs. We've seen evidence of this.
Paul George frightening in the playoffs for the wrong reason.
Sure,
see what I did there. Yes, but he could be like. That's a guy who, if he plays,
if you're willing to go back a few years, we've seen Paul George kick the bleep out of
absolutely. They've got 2 of those guys.
Nikola Jokic has been awesome in the playoffs.
Luka, Dame,
right? Nobody on Utah, even Donovan Mitchell, feels scary in the playoffs. And I think with Phoenix, Chris Paul has been, I think, better than a lot of people regard him as in the postseason. But the team doesn't feel good enough for Chris Paul.
That's got to be Devin Booker's job,
right?
Like the guy
and he's literally never been in the playoffs. So again, all of these things could change once it all starts up, and it could turn out that Phoenix is a hell of a lot realer as a 2 seed and realer as a team that can get through all this than we are expecting right now. But neither one of those teams feels scary in a way that you could look at just about every other team in the West and some teams in the East and say, all right, they're scary because of player X.
No, you're right. All right. Well, there's a lot that we did. Yeah, you're right. There's a lot that we did not. The irony too here, and we'll go, is if you'd said at the beginning of the year that the Lakers would play the Suns in the first round, that actually wouldn't have surprised anybody. And you told them that it was a 2-7, that wouldn't have surprised anybody. We just got it backwards in terms of how the order, and that would have surprised everyone.
But that's also in part what makes it not feel scary.
Yeah, it's a good point. So there's a lot that we did not get to today. We did not really talk about the center rotation, what it might look like. Sunday night, Trez did not play. Marc Gasol did. Saturday, Trez did play. I think all 3 of them did. Or no, maybe Gasol. There's some stuff to work out with the center rotation and the rotation generally, which we'll get into. We're going to do a lot of previewing of Wednesday's game and quickly pivot after that, we hope, quickly into a first round. Still so much stuff to get into, Andy. We're finally reaching the fun part.
I know, man. We've had to slog through a lot this season, but now the good stuff is getting going, and I'm
nervous. I'm a little nervous. The Lakers are not exactly rock solid right now. They've got some weaknesses. They're going to have to figure it out.
They are on a 5-game winning streak. I mean, I will say this, for a team that's had a lot of hand-wringing that is understandable, they are moving into the playoffs with some momentum. I mean, to whatever degree you think that stuff actually matters, they do have it right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was, it could have been worse. There's no question about that. So 2 really hot teams in what could only be considered an Adam Silver fever dream going at it on Wednesday, 7:00 Pacific time. So much to get into between now and then. Do want to remind you, look out for our video, Locked On Lakers YouTube channel. Send us some emails at KamBrothers@KamenetskyBrothers@gmail.com. And it's going to be a lot of fun for the next few weeks.
Make sure to be joining us in our locker room chat, noon Pacific every Friday.
All right. We will see everyone tomorrow.